because we've talked about that like a while ago. I remember us talking about that, how your your average the average of how you play is going to be your average. So when you have that high end game where you were just firing, the temptation again as the coach, as the parent, as the people judging are going to be like, that's the bar. Like that's where you need to be every game. That's how you need to play every game. It's like that is actually not possible. It's actually not possible, because if they could do that every game, they would do that every game. That would be the consistent level that they're at.
Yeah.
So
Gretzky, Lemieux, McDavid, Crosby, all
Yeah.
those guys would have 5-6 point nights every night.
yeah, right. So for them, that's them, right? That is their average. Their average is that good. But for most kids, when they have their standout game, resist. I guess that's kind of my take home, like the thread that I'm kind of following is like resist the urge to enforce their absolute best as the bar that needs to be there every game, because, and I'm not saying you would ever say this necessarily, but that is like the common parlance of, how about that, eh? Parlance.
You don't use that word very
Why did I
often.
think of that word?
You're just on that.
Yeah, on
You're
that level.
above average on your speaking today.
So but I think that's the common line, right? It's like you need to be at your best every single day. You need to be at your best, and like we even say that, like you need to be at your best every single day to give yourself the best chance at, being successful or moving on or whatever. And though that's true, we need to be clear about what your best actually is. And your best isn't going to be the off standout game where everything just went right and you just had everything dialed in perfectly, and that is your absolute best. It's like that is your absolute best, but is that your best every day? And for most kids, that's not what their best is going to be every day. And the goal over time is to raise the line of what your consistent level is every day. So if you are constantly holding your kid or your players to something that is not realistic for them to actually sustain every day, then I think you start to lose track of what you can actually expect from them. So if you see your kid, the kid has like this phenomenal game, and you're like, see, I see you can do it. Like I know you got it in there.
Or why don't you just do that every game?
Yeah.
You're that's what you are, dude.
Yeah, exactly. And
That's not.
I want to like thread the needle too, because like I said, at the same time, it's like you want to hold them to the highest standard possible. I guess I'm saying more internally. Like I'm not suggesting this as messaging to the player, because I think my messaging would still be those things. Like this is what you got to shoot for. Like this is what you want to raise to. This is what you want to be every day. I think that's all good messaging. But for yourself internally, like when you're judging the player or when you're judging the athlete or the kid on your team or whatever, be realistic in your judgment of what's actually attainable,
So that's why it's important that you have your identity, right? Yeah. Not like an identity like you can't step out of it, but it's an identity of the ideal of what that player is.
Yeah.
If you go ahead,
do you get what I'm saying though? Like the difference between me saying, like all the messaging I'm giving right now, the difference between saying that to a player and you just knowing it and being aware of it as the coach.
You're never going to tell a guy like, if you're not great today, just make sure you're average, eh?
Yeah, like I'm trying to figure out a way to.
No. What you're doing is of course you're going to do that. You're gonna, you always have to demand excellence. You always have to demand someone's best, and push and nudge people to be their best. Because what would happen is just like practice today with the groups that I had today. If I'm not, so let's just, a lot of the focus was on a lot of different passing sequences that turn into shots, where I want good shots, but the passing and the foot movements had to be very good. And so the passing was what I was really focusing on. And like, if they're not feeling it today, it's not okay to say, yeah, I know you guys are probably just off a little bit. So because right. You can still make a great pass.
Yes.
Right. It might not be, right. Anyways, you could still do the skill of making a great pass. Very, very, few and far between. If you're focused and you're a good player, you should make shitty passes. So that's like stuff like that. You should always expect the best from them, and then have high expectations, but understand that they might not be there 100%. Yeah, that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. I think I answered it for you.
Yeah, like I don't want the messaging to be like a big contradiction, because on the one hand I'm saying understand that they can't really achieve that every day. But then on the other hand, it's like me personally, I would consistently message like, "Hey man, I've seen you do this thing in the game. I know you can do it. I need you to do it more." Like that is fair messaging. While at the same time, if it's a kid that might be more limited for some reason, I'm also in my head being aware that, okay, I'm pushing this kid to try to raise that bar, but how I feel towards this player is not going to be that. Like I'm not going to be holding them to this bar in my head every day because I know their consistent level is going to be below that. But my messaging to them is going to be make sure we're striving to keep raising that bar. Because then I think that's where you'll start to draw a really fine line as a coach between being like firm but fair, where it's like you're always giving them a fair assessment and a fair expectation based on where they're at, but you're also giving them that firm push to make sure they're still striving and achieving. Like I just had a meeting with a kid this morning where we were kind of doing that. We were talking about more from an academic standpoint than hockey, but nonetheless, it's like, hey, we know you need some supports in certain ways, but I also know that you can pick it up. Like you can do your part to be better, right? Like you can raise the bar of what you're doing academically from where you're at. So I want to. I'm
But
trying to.
here's the thing, though, right? Because this is just to me, this is true. You might not have your best game, but pick a position. Go ahead. Right wing. Okay. The right winger, whether you're having a great game or a bad game, the results or the expectations is when the puck comes on that wall and there's a battle or it comes to your wall to go out, you need to make the right decision or execute it. You have to do it. So whether you do it at your best or at your worst, that's your expectation. So it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter anything. That's what your expectations are. So if you're at your best, it's probably coming out most of the time. If you're at your middle ground, it's probably coming out most of the time because that's your job, or maybe a little bit less than 100%. And if you're at your worst, you still are supposed to get that puck out. Maybe your skating's not as good, but that puck needs to get out. For example, if it doesn't come out over and over, then you're just on a bad game. You don't actually deserve to play. 1 second. The old girl always thinks I'm available, right? So the habits that you have to do. It doesn't mean that because you're not having a great, like you're at the, let's say the bottom third of your expectations or your performance, you're at the lower level. That doesn't mean that you can't backcheck. You still have to backcheck. You still have to do the habits. So I think the most important thing is you have habits, do your habits. They might not, that you might bobble a puck more, but your habits have to be the same. You know what I mean? So, and then even saying that, like, so it's like, that gives you a level playing field of what you can kind of control. True. Right. Like sometimes you can't control who you play with. Sometimes you can't control, maybe like you said, the recovery is high, low, whatever. Sometimes you can't control necessarily that, but you can control your habits. It doesn't change that when the puck's over the red line, if you're maybe not that creative or can handle a puck, that you dump it in the corner the right way, right? Like those are habits. And then the other side of it is the other thing you can control, even though like your parents might have been up late the night before and you might have went to a party with your parents, or things weren't good at your billets that you didn't get to eat the way you normally do. But what you can control is most of the time, if you have habits where your bedtime is roughly 10 o'clock, let's say, if you went to bed a couple nights at 12, well, that's kind of on you. If you didn't drink 10 of these a day, you drank one and you had 7 cappuccinos instead, then that's on you, right? If you went to Five Guys or A&W a few times that in the days prior to your performance, then that's on you. It's like, so there's certain things you still can control, and then there's times where it's just some days you're going to be, some days you're the hammer, some days you're the nail.
Yeah, yeah. The Andyisms.